Welcome back to Proxy, everybody, and today I am going to be revealing the new Eldar Knights Codex project for 2025. Now, for those of you guys who don't know, a couple years back, this channel started a FANDEX project based on the old Eldar Knights from way back in the day when Games Workshop supported the Epic game, which, again, for those of you who don't know what Epic was, it was a very miniature version of Warhammer 40k. You were basically in control of massive armies, and the models were insanely small. Think about, models today, but like 1/8 of the size that they are. And they would be on, rather large bases, and they would have multiple models per base. So it was kind of like, some historical war games do this where they just have these massive ranks of troops and the models are really small. So that was the Epic game. And there was a faction within that called the Eldar Knights. And the Eldar Knights were essentially what Chaos and Imperial Knights are today. They were a Eldar version of these big knights that would kind of, roam the battlefields and just bring pure destruction to their enemies. And back in the day, you'd have all these different Eldar Knights models. So, since then, GW has discontinued the Epic game. They have discontinued Eldar Knights altogether. We haven't even seen one single mention of them in recent lore. And they're basically all but forgotten. GW has, in pretty much every way, moved on from the Eldar Knights. Not only their lore, but their, kind of presence as well. They're just not mentioned. So, what are the Eldar Knights? Well, the Eldar Knights, typically the backstory behind these guys is they are clans of Eldari, or clans of Eldar, that inhabit these constructs, these knights. And they're not really like Wraith Knights per se, right? Wraith Knights and Wraith Lords and stuff like that, they are inhabited by spirit stones of dead Eldari. Knights are actually piloted by Eldar. So they're more like Imperial and Chaos Knights in that way. Now, what I've done is I've basically created a little index. About 2 years ago, I created an index that you could play with these kind of models in your casual game. So obviously this is a FANDEX. I just want to make that clear right off the bat. This is a fan work. So, obviously it's not official GW anything, but I thought it would be really cool if the Eldar community could possibly have a rule set to play a version of knights. So Chaos gets knights, Imperium gets knights. Why can't we have some knights, right? So this time around, because the Imperial Knights and Chaos Knights Codex is coming out, I thought this would be a good time to reinvigorate the project. And, what better way to do that than to make a codex? So I do have some experience creating rules. I created the Eldar Knights Index, which I think was a success. I play tested it, and back in the day, change years ago, it was a pretty cool project. I had a lot of fun making it, and the rules were relatively balanced. And actually, they were kind of on the weaker side. So there was no power creep or anything like that. I remember play testing this against my buddies, and we had some really close games, and we had a lot of fun. And there was very few things that we found to be problematic. Now, going forward, a lot of things have changed. So we're going to obviously have to change some of the rules in the index. And in just a second, after we go over the project and what it entails and so forth, we will be doing an index review. We're going to be going and looking at the actual index and kind of looking at that as a, work that had been done 2 years ago and needs to be changed and updated. So what is this project going to have? Because many of you might be looking at this and being like, oh, well, obviously you want to write a codex, but it seems like there's some things that might be a little bit different than what you've already done. So here's what it is. This is going to be a project that I'm trying to raise at least $250 for, and this is just for the massive amount of time and resources I'm going to have to put into this. The index, by the way, guys, I wanted to raise a similar amount and it didn't meet its goal. So I went ahead and did the index anyway because I thought it'd be awesome for the Eldar community to have that. However, a codex is going to be 4 times the amount of effort that the index was. So for me to be able to, kind of justify putting that much time into it, I would like to see, some kind of return on that, for example, and also having the ability to print some of these and work with the community to create Eldar Knight data sheets, and also, work with the community to create STL files and perhaps even art, for these Eldar Knights, is going to be something that I actually want to do this time around. So that's why there's a pledge goal for this. This is why I'm not just doing it for free. I want this to actually be something we can, as a community, work together on. And I already have people who have put in considerable amount of time. And if we go over the pledge goal amount, I want to reward those people for their efforts. So we'll see where we get with it, but the 250 goal is going to get you this. It is going to get you, if we reach our goal, we're going to go ahead and go past here and we'll go to the available rewards here. It is going to get you a digital copy of the Eldar Knights Codex. So basically, I'm going to put this in a PDF form. Again, we already have the Eldar Knights Index in PDF form, but I kind of had to go cheapo on it because, like I said, we didn't earn enough money to actually, we didn't earn anything, right? Kickstarter, you have to reach your pledge goal to do something with it. So we didn't really get anywhere with that. So this time around, I'm hoping we can reach the goal so that I can actually create a really good looking digital download. And basically, if you give $3 to the campaign, you will have access to the digital download once it's completed. The estimated delivery for this is sometime in August. So I will probably be done with it by August. That's my goal. Basically, I'm giving myself a month and a half. Well, almost 2 months, right? I'm giving myself until the end of August to have this completed. So I personally think I'll get done earlier, but we'll just have to see. Now, you might be wondering what the other pledge rewards are. Well, if you pledge $25, and there are 10 of these available, then you will be able to create with me your own data sheet for the Eldar Knights Codex. And this will be in addition to the 15 data sheets that will be in the Codex. So there's going to be about 15 data sheets roughly that I want to put back in the Codex from the index, and whoever is able to pledge at the $25 amount will also be able to create an Eldar Knight that is different from one of the ones already in the index, and you're going to be able to create that with me. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to sit down and we're going to create it together. You're going to let me know about the rules and stuff like that, or if you just want to send a list of ideas, I can create something out of that. Now, all of these are going to be balanced based on the current state of 10th edition. So we've seen the updates to Chaos Knights. We've seen the updates to Imperial Knights. So the data sheets are going to be balanced based on those data sheets that already exist in the game. So we're going to kind of use those as a basis for the Eldar Knights in a lot of ways. But of course, Eldar Knights are going to be faster and they're going to be trickier, right? So they're not going to be as straightforward as the Imperial and Chaos Knights. Okay, so there's 10 of those. So hopefully we can get all 10 and we can have 25 data sheets in the Codex. Alrighty. And the last thing is the physical copy. Now, I want to just reiterate this. Everybody who is able to pledge $35 will get a physical version of the Codex. However, it depends what we actually make, right? So if we don't hit our goal, then I can't do this, right? And actually, if we don't hit our goal, I can't really do any of this. But if we do hit our goal and we get enough, the Eldar Knights Codex will be printed out and shipped to everybody who, basically pledges $35. Now, the physical copy, I'm hoping, will include fan-made art and also STL files, perhaps. So we can go ahead and give you the... Oh, by the way, everybody who pledges automatically gets access to the channel's Discord as well. So I will send you a Discord link. All you have to do is shoot me a message or shoot me an email, and I will give you the Discord link so that you can join our Discord. So yeah, basically just join the Discord. You'll get an invite, and you'll get all the STL files at your fingertips that we have access to so far. So I just want to take this moment to thank all of the people on the Discord that have created art or STL files for the Eldar Knights. So there's quite a few of them. Mocking Asp, I would like to, reach out and thank him because he did a lot of work for the index, and unfortunately we just didn't reach our funding goals, so I couldn't really give anything to him, but he did a great job working on that. We also have Grand Seer, who has created a lot of, STL files for the Eldar Knights. We have Compound, who is another member of the Discord, who created some STL files and example art of what Eldar Knights might look like. And again, these are going to be basically compiled, and we are going to put these in the codex as well. So with the, creator's permission, of course. And hopefully we can get over our goal so that, people can actually, be rewarded for that effort. Okay. All right. So the last thing is, this is going to be the project, and we're going to have to raise this amount in 14 days. So again, the goal is 250. I would love to get more than that. We do have late pledges available so that we can, and basically anything over 250 is going to be distributed, hopefully among creators. But, we'll see where we get. I'm not, getting my hopes up that we're going to get a bunch of money on this. That's not the goal. The goal really is just to have this project for you guys out so that we can, kind of invigorate the Eldar community a little bit and stuff like that. So we'll see what happens. But if you guys are interested, I will leave the link to this project in the description of this video. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and look at the index review. So I've gone ahead and I've done a review of the old index that I created so that all of you guys can see the culmination of the work. And like I said, there are going to be changes, It's just that we didn't reach our funding goals last time, so I kind of just had to, I couldn't afford, basically, with my job and everything else going on, to really get and invest anything into it. So, but we do have the rules, and we have, I think it's 15 data sheets or 13 data sheets that we've created based on the Eldar Knights. So, yeah. Anyway, thank you guys for kind of listening to that, and let us go ahead and look at the index review. So as you guys see on the screen before you, this is the Eldar Knights index that I created back in 2023. So as some of you might remember, there was a time on this channel where I was really pushing a lot of kind of community-based creations. And this is one of the creations that I took a lot of pride in and actually followed through and finished. Now, I did have a short Kickstarter on this back in November of 2023. Unfortunately, the Kickstarter really didn't gain enough support to fully support what I wanted to do with the index, but I did write the rules for it, and I made it available free for everybody. So basically what this was is a FANDEX of the old Eldar Knights. So if some of you old timers might remember, way back in the day, just like they have Chaos Knights and Imperial Knights, Eldar Knights existed in Warhammer 40k. They were part of Games Workshop's, at the time, the company Games Workshop's, Epic range. So Epic battles were massive battles that took part with really, really small models or really small miniatures, and they were usually played in trays. So, for example, War Walkers, you might have 3 or 4 War Walkers on a very small base, and they were miniaturized. So, if anybody kind of needs some context, just Google it. Just type into Google Eldar Knights Epic, and you'll get a lot of images of what that looked like. But essentially, the idea behind it was that Eldar also had these giant knights. Now, over time, with the kind of, obvious breakdown of Epic, GW doesn't support that game anymore, people forgot about the Eldar Knights. And over time, Eldar Knights eventually would just become what you see today. The Phantom Titan and the Revenant Titan that we have for Apocalypse style games. However, I wanted to really bring this back to the Eldar community. And I wanted to do kind of like my own take on what they would look like now in 10th edition. So I did a small Kickstarter, basically just, supporting an Eldar Knights index. Now, fast forward 2 years, and with the introduction of the new Chaos Knight and Imperial Knight codexes that are coming, I thought to myself, it's probably never going to be a better time than to update this into a codex. So what we're going to do today is we're going to kind of look through the index that I created. We're going to go through some of the changes, and I want to kind of discuss the different ideas I have behind this FANDEX and what I want to basically do with it from here. Now, I'm going to be totally transparent and honest up front. I do want to do a small Kickstarter based on this idea of making the codex. It's going to take many, many hours. It's going to take a lot of, work pretty much for the next month or so. And I want to be able to get something a little bit more in the codex itself than just the rules. Maybe some art, maybe some lore. We already have some designs that have been created by the community, and I want to see if we can expand on this. So, yeah, essentially, I'll do a few kind of things with the rules right here and now that I'll kind of update with you guys and show you what I've made so far as the index. And then I will go ahead and point you guys to the Kickstarter to see if anybody is interested in supporting it. All right, so let's go ahead and dive in without further ado. Now, this was back in 2023. It was 10th edition, but you guys have to remember it was a different rule set at the time. So some of these rules are a little outdated, but as we go through it, I'll kind of talk about what I plan to update when the codex comes. All right, so the first thing we have to look at is the army rule. Now, I really wanted this army to be very much centered around being precise and accurate and hard-hitting, right? So Eldar Knights are generally faster. They are generally, more precise than their Imperial counterparts. Therefore, we have the army rule, Engine of Fates. So once per turn, per model, a model with this ability can add +1 to one of the following rolls after the roll is made. So that roll then counts as modified. So unfortunately, you can't just, make a dev wound on a 5+ normally under normal circumstances. I think that would be a little bit too overpowered, but this is still a pretty strong army rule. Now, full disclosure, I am going to change this with the codex to kind of better reflect the change in the rules that have occurred over the last year and a half. So let's go and just look at this. Basically, you can add 1 to any of the following rolls. You can add 1 to an advance roll, a battle shock test. And again, these are all once per turn. So your turn and the opponent's turn are different. A charge roll, a damage roll, a hit roll, a saving throw, or a wound roll. But again, it counts as modified. So if you want to, proc a sustained hit or a devastating wound or a lethal hit, you're just not going to be able to do that with Engines of Fate. But this is still very good. And essentially, to give you an idea of how good this is, once per turn, so for example, let's enter the shooting phase, one of your units rolls their shooting attacks, and any one of those dice can be changed up 1, +1 basically. So let's say you roll 6 dice, you hit on 3s, you get 4 hits and 2 misses. One of those hits can be or one of those misses, I should say, can be automatically changed to a hit. Same thing can be said of any of these other rolls, but it's only once per turn. So as the Eldar player, you really have to think hard about what rolls matter and what you want the unit to do that turn. And also, during your opponent's turn, you could do it for saving throws or Overwatch. So getting a guaranteed, or not a guaranteed, but getting an Overwatch on a 5+ instead of a 4+ might be something that you're wanting to do as well. Okay, let's take a look at the other army rule. This army rule is nimble. So each time this model makes a normal, advance, or fallback move, it can move over other models, excluding Titanic models and terrain features that are 4 inches or less in height, as if they were not there. So this is basically the Imperial Knight and Chaos Knight rule for their big knights. And of course, the Eldar Knights have the same thing. Now, this will be updated as well because the rule itself has changed. So we are going to kind of make it in line with what there is currently. Lastly, we have our detachment. So we are going to have several detachments. I'm thinking 4 detachments to start out would be enough. And I think we can kind of go from there. But 4 detachments seems about right for a project of this size. And the index detachment is called Tides of Battle. There will be a similar detachment in the codex, but it's not going to be exactly the same. But here's what it does. And I really was proud of this because when I play tested this index, this special rule was really fun to use. It was really insanely fun, but it did have some trade-offs. So Eldar Knight models in this detachment that destroy an enemy unit in your shooting phase can make a normal move of up to 3 inches at the end of the shooting phase if they are not within engagement range of 1 or more enemy units, have advanced, or are battle shocked. So if none of those things apply, you're not in engagement range, you're not battle shocked, you haven't advanced, then once you shoot, you destroy an enemy unit, you can move 3 inches at the end of the shooting phase. Now, under normal circumstances in a normal Eldari army, this might not be that great because a lot of your units are not going to be just outright killing things in one turn. But remember, we're playing an Eldar Knights army, and a lot of the units that you have are very deadly and they're very expensive. So oftentimes a big knight can go up, shoot something to death, then move 3 inches at the end of the shooting phase, and this does not necessarily prevent them from then charging afterward. So this is a powerful combo that you can pull off. And also kind of goes along with the theme of Eldari Knights, or Eldar Knights, I should say, not Eldari Knights, but Eldar Knights being very fast. The other side of this rule is that Eldar Knight models in this detachment that destroy an enemy unit in the fight phase can make a normal move of 3 inches at the end of the fight phase instead of a consolidation move if they are not within engagement range of 1 or more enemy units or are battle shocked. So if your opponent is fully destroyed, doesn't have anything left in engagement range with you, instead of making a consolidation move, which is kind of limiting in the ways that you can move, Eldari Knights can just move 3 inches instead, which I think makes a lot of sense. Again, being the Eldari Knights are a little bit trickier, and instead of something like a 6-inch consolidation or 6-inch pile-in, I decided it would be more fun to just say, I can move 3 inches just like in consolidation, but I can move anywhere, right? Which gives them a little bit more room to kind of move around. A skilled player will look at this and say, wow, this is a really powerful rule. This is really cool. However, of course, there are a little bit of drawbacks to this, right? You have to be outside of engagement range. You can't be within engagement range. And of course, you can't be battle shocked. So if your opponent has a stratagem or something like that that causes battle shock, unfortunately, you're just not going to be able to use it. So there is some counterplay to this rule as well. Okay, let us go ahead and look at these stratagems. Now, again, some of these are going to change because based on some of the things and rule changes that we've seen in the game, but let's go ahead and read through them. Now, a lot of them are going to look a little bit on the weaker side at first, but again, these are going to be on very powerful models, so that should give you a pretty strong idea of what this army can do when it synergizes properly. So the first one is adaptive shielding. For 1 CP, it happens in your opponent's shooting phase or the fight phase just after an enemy unit has selected its targets, and one Eldar Knights unit from your army, excluding those with the damaged rule, so those that are, kind of bracketed, so to speak, that was selected as one or more of attacks, can re-roll invulnerable saving throws of 1 until the end of the phase. So essentially what this is your opponent targets you with some range attacks, and you can go ahead and say, I'm going to re-roll invulnerable saves of 1. Now, normally, Eldar Knights have a 5+ invulnerable save against range attacks. They also have a 5+ invulnerable save in combat. So they're a little bit different than Imperial Knights and Chaos Knights that only get the ranged version. Essentially, there's a trade-off with Eldar Knights, and I'll go ahead and discuss it more when we get into the data sheets, but they kind of trade the traditional durability of Knight models for a little bit of extra utility and speed. Okay, so that's adaptive shielding. Pretty good stratagem. You'll use it if you really want to save one of your Knight models. And again, remember, you can get +1 to your saving throws. So, if you roll a 4, then that can count as a 5 instead of, what would normally pass. And if you roll a 1, if you have a bunch of saves to make and one of those is a 1, you're still going to be able to re-roll it and then perhaps even add your, Engines of Fate bonus to that. So looks pretty weak at first. You're like, oh, only invulnerable saving throws of 1. That's pretty terrible. But when you really think about the synergies with everything included, it actually becomes pretty good. The next one is Deceptive Retreat. And I'll just kind of spare you the wording on this. This is basically a fallback shoot and charge stratagem. So if you're stuck in combat, you can disengage for free, or disengage for 1 CP, 2 CP if the unit is a Titanic model, and you're eligible to shoot and declare a charge. Basically, fallback, shoot, and charge. Pretty simple. The next one is Graceful Advance. One Eldar Knights model from your army that advanced can shoot until, shoot in advance. So it's basically your weapons have assault. Now, I think what I'll do for this specific stratagem is I'll just change the wording so that it just gives the assault keyword to the ranged weapons of the model. I think that's probably a better way to word it, but basically gives you advance and shoot. The next stratagem is called Shield Discharge. So this is a 1 CP strat. After an enemy unit selects its target, so basically after it charges, after the charge phase is over and when the fight phase begins and your opponent selects its targets, you can use this ability. As long as the Eldar Knights model is not damaged or bracketed, then an enemy unit will suffer D6 mortal wounds and must take a battle shock test. So, one restriction though, is that you can't target an Eldar Knights unit that was also the target of adaptive shielding this turn. So again, it's only 1 CP. This is a very powerful strat for 1 CP. D6 mortal wounds and must take a battle shock test is pretty awesome. But can't use it in conjunction with adaptive shielding, which means if you use this, it's kind of like temporarily your Eldar Knight loses its shield because it used its shield to discharge, right? And cause mortal wounds. Okay, so that's the shield discharge. Basically, the idea behind this is just so that, your opponent can't try to tie you up with any, low model count units that maybe you destroyed 9 out of 10 models in a unit and your opponent just decides, oh, I'm just going to, try to stick in combat with you or consolidate into you or something like that. It's not going to work because in the fight phase, you can just blow them away with this thing. Okay, so, and of course, I mean, I guess they could consolidate into you, but you'd still be able to attack, right? So it's just before an enemy unit has selected its target. So it's a pretty good stratagem. I'm actually going to change the wording on this a little bit as well, though, to better fit the game state, just because there's a lot of things in the game right now that would probably just not care about this. So I'm going to make it a little bit more impactful while not making it too OP. But anyway, there's going to be 4 detachments. So this stratagem will make it into one of them. Then we have the Fateful Contingency stratagem. It's 2 CP normally, but 3 CP if the unit is Titanic. So again, in this army, we have both Eldar Knights that are not Titanic and Eldar Knights that are Titanic, just like Imperial Knights and Chaos Knights. And this stratagem happens right after your opponent's shooting phase or fight phase after an enemy unit has resolved its attacks. So one damaged model, so basically one unit that is damaged or bracketed in your army that was selected as the target of one or more of the attacking unit's attacks. So after those attacks are made and resolved, you can go ahead and remove the unit from the battlefield and set it up anywhere that is more than 9 inches horizontally away from all enemy models. If this is not possible for some reason, then you can place the unit in strat reserve and it can come in the following turn in the reinforcement step. But it must come in the following turn. You can't keep it in indefinitely, which I think is a balancing factor. Now, some of you might think this is really OP, but again, you can only target a damaged model, so it has to be bracketed. So I think that's pretty fair, and it costs 3 CP if the unit's Titanic. I might change this, to be honest, because I think just being damaged is enough of a, kind of weakness of the stratagem that we can go ahead and say it's fair. And in my playtesting, I was never able to actually use this ability. It never came up, right? I either never had the 3 CP to use, which was usually the case. I either didn't have the 3 CP, or it was a matter of, oh, it's not damaged, so it can't be used. So I think I'm going to reword it a little bit, probably make it just 2 CP and leave it at that. Okay. Next and last, we have Martial Symbiosis. So you select 2 Eldar Knights from your army that are eligible to shoot or fight, and 1 enemy unit that is an eligible target for both Eldar Knight units. You can use this in the shooting or fight phase, of course, and both Eldar Knight models get rerolls 1s to hit and to wound against that enemy unit for the remainder of the phase. So essentially, think, I guess in weird terms, think of like the combined arms detachment for guard, how you select 2 units and they both get, -1 AP value against that target, or it's something like that. I don't know the exact wording, but it's like that, except instead of -1 AP, you get rerolls 1s to hit and wound. So that's the stratagem lineup. Again, I'm going to change the wording on some of these to make it a little bit better to understand. But yeah, essentially, pretty solid group of balance. You have some defensive stratagems, you have some offensive stratagems, and utility strats. So yeah, pretty decent set of stratagems there. Let me know what you guys think of these in general. I think they're pretty balanced. I think I do need to change the wording on some of them. But anyway, let me know what you guys think, and let me know what some of your ideas are, and maybe I'll put them in the codex. All right, so enhancements. This is the next group of stuff, and we start off with Rune of Command. 25 points. This can only be put on the Hipparch model. It's basically an autarch, quote unquote, of your Eldar Knights. It's the autarch equivalent, or the Canis Rex equivalent. So if your model is your warlord and is on the battlefield, which it will be, you may reroll all failed battle shock and leadership tests for Eldar Knights units in your army. This is pretty powerful, and actually, when I play tested this, it was kind of a little too strong. So what I think is going to happen is I think I'm going to either up the points of it, or I'm going to make it so that Eldar units that are damaged aren't actually eligible to reroll. So basically, you have to be unbracketed for this to count. And the reason why this was a problem is because bracketed Eldar Knights, just like Imperial Knights and Chaos Knights, lose OC value, but they don't lose all their OC value. So being able to just pass battle shock and leadership tests all the time is a little bit strong. So I think either probably up the points of this or change the wording a little bit so that it's a little bit more fair, because it is all your models. The next one is Runes of Destruction. Eldar Knight Psyker model only. Psychic weapons equipped by the bearer gain lethal hits. So pretty balanced. I had a fun time with this. I have a couple of models in the datasheet lineup that love this enhancement. And it is just, it's worth about 20 points. Next is Runes of Warding. This was a fun one. It didn't come up that often, but when it did come up, it was pretty cool. So Eldar Knight Psyker model only, and we do have Psychic Eldar Knights. Each time an enemy psychic ability is used within 12 inches of the bearer, you roll 1d6, and on a 2-up, that psychic ability cannot be used until the end of the turn and takes no effect. Now, The reason this is balanced, a lot of you will think this is unbalanced, but the reason it's balanced is because your opponent knows it's 12 inches, right? So if your opponent wants to use a psychic ability, they just have to stay outside of 12 inches. Not that big of a deal. It's also 35 points. It's also very situational. I got a couple people when I did the index a couple years ago say that this was really OP and that it was super, strong and it was basically just going to destroy everything. It didn't. I play tested it. I even had my opponent take several librarians, and it was just a simple matter of staying outside of 12 or just destroying the unit with runes of warding. That simple, right? It's not that big of a deal. I am going to change this a little bit to be slightly different, but I think that in essence, I want to keep this the same. So again, it's going to change, and I think I'm going to actually buff it a little bit so that it doesn't just happen on a 2-up, it happens automatically. But again, that 12 inches is a very limiting factor. Okay. Next one is Shroud of Obscuration. Eldar Knights model only. It used to be only models with 10 or less wounds, but I decided that there was just no real way of making this useful on a small knight, because the small knights in the current index, 2 of them already had, or I think 1 of them already had stealth. So this really didn't help the models that, could take it. And plus, there were also only 1 character in that group of models. So, yeah, I just removed that. But the bearer basically gains stealth. I think that's pretty worth it for 125 points. And then lastly, we have Webway Strike. This is the more expensive stratagem. Eldar Knight model only. After determining which player has the first turn, but before the battle begins, you may select the bearer from your army and redeploy it. When doing so, you can set up the bearer in strat reserves if you want to, regardless of how many units are already in strat reserves. This is basically just a redeployment that happens after you know who gets first turn. Pretty simple. However, I think the insane cost of this really kind of makes it a little bit less useful. And typically speaking, you want all your models on the board. So again, I'm going to have to think of a different way to use this. I think what this is going to end up being is simply an once per game uppy downy. I think I'm going to just change it to where once per game you can redeploy your model, put it in strat reserves at the end of the opponent's turn, and then come in, just like the Chaos Knight version of this enhancement. Okay. Let's talk about the data sheets. So again, a lot of these data sheets might seem pretty tame compared to what we're seeing out of the Chaos Knight and Imperial Knight Codex. But this was written 2 years ago when Chaos Knights and Imperial Knights were a little less dominant. So there's a couple of things that we have to know about the types of knights in an Eldar army. There are 2 different types of knights. There are the small baby knights and there are the big knights. So the big knights are going to have higher movement than their Imperial counterparts, but they're going to have less toughness. So right now, the Imperial Knights have toughness 11. These are going to have toughness 10. They're going to still have that 3+ armor save. They're going to have 20 wounds instead of, I think the Imperial Knights have 26 wounds, so they have a lot more wounds. Leadership 6 still, OC 10, which is the same as they have. However, when we go to the invulnerable save, the Eldar Knights are always going to have a 5+ invulnerable save, whether they're in close combat or at range, and this is to represent their innate speed and agility. They're, of course, damaged when they get to 1 to 6 wounds, and as the wounds increase, this will also increase, and as the wounds decrease, this will decrease as well. When you are damaged, you're going to lose 1 from the hit roll, you're going to subtract 5 from the model's objective control characteristic, and it loses its invulnerable save. Pretty standard. Okay, let's get into the ranged weapons. So the Abyssal Hunter is a long-range attacker, obviously. It is an anti-large unit. It's going to have a 36-inch range, hits on a 3+, it has 1 attack base, strength 20, AP -4, damage 8. But here's the cool thing. It has sustained hits D3 and devastating wounds. So when it hits something very hard, especially with sustained hits. Its melee capabilities are a little bit less fantastic. And you're going to notice this with pretty much all of the Eldar Knights, is that there are specialized units. So either they are going to be really good in combat or really good at range, but typically not both. So it gives your opponent kind of a little bit of a way to play around them in certain circumstances, which I think is balanced. So the melee capabilities aren't bad, right? 3 attacks, strength 12, AP -3, damage D6 with dev wounds. Not terrible, but not great, right? This model in particular is a shooting unit that really does, you know, it doesn't like getting tied up in combat. So let's go ahead and look at its options. As far as its war gear options, it doesn't have any. It is just armed with the Abyssal Emission Cannon and the Spear of the Abyss. I might go back and add something else to this model, but at the time I thought 475 was pretty on the money for what this should be. Now I will say this though, the rule is insane, and the rule kind of makes it that many points. Again, I might go back and redo the points because as we've seen, Imperial Knights have gotten a lot cheaper, and so have Chaos Knights. So we might have to switch the points around a little bit on some of these data sheets. So it does have Engines of Fate and Nimble. Its Relentless Hunter ability is what makes it super powerful. So each time it makes a range attack, if that target is a vehicle or monster, an unmodified successful hit roll of a 4+ scores a critical hit. And what is a critical hit, guys? It is a sustained hits D3, right? So that's where that comes from. If that target is a vehicle or monster and has a wounds value of 16 or more, and of course we're talking about the starting wounds here, not the remaining wounds, then an unmodified hit roll of a 3+ scores a critical hit instead. Now that's crazy. That basically means that against things like Rogal Dorn's, just big things that you need to kill, this is going to always proc a critical hit. I might change the wording a little bit to just make it so that every hit that it scores is a critical hit, just kind of like what the Death Jester enhancement does in the, Ghost of the Webway. But we'll see. I think that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'll have to change the wording of this, but you guys get the idea. And it also has the Hunter's Mark ability. Each time this model makes a range attack, you can ignore any or all modifiers to that attack's ballistic skill characteristic and the hit roll. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. It's like a Dark Reaper, just ignores that. Doesn't ignore cover though. So that is one thing that it needs, is probably something to give it ignores cover. But we do have dev wounds. So I think for 475 points, this might even be a tad on the weaker side just because of how many points it costs, but it is really strong for that. Okay, let's look at the Auric Sibyl. The Auric Sibyl is a Psyker model. It has a kind of a tilt towards anti-demon. So if you guys know anything about the old Eldar Knights, they were like the protectors of the Exodite worlds and stuff. So this is going to be something that is going to really be good at fighting against demons. It can choose between either the prophetic sphere or spear or blade. It has on the spear 3 attacks at strength 9, AP -1, damage 6, anti-demon 2+, and psychic. So really strong against big demons. Then the blade has 6 attacks, strength 7, AP -1, damage 3, anti-demon 2 up. So essentially, spear is good against large stuff. Blade is good against smaller stuff. And then we have the Warp Rift, which is the ranged weapon. And that's going to be D3 attacks at strength 8, AP -3, damage 3. Again, it's going to be anti-demon, anti-psyker 2+, blast, and psychic. So really good against psychers, really good against demons. And then we have a basic shuriken cannon array because usually the big knights are going to have some sort of secondary weapon system. This one has 6 attacks, strength 6, AP -1, damage 2. Now, I am going to change the sustained hits 1 to lethal hits because, of course, as we know, the Eldar Codex or Eldari Codex got changed so that shuriken cannons are a little bit different. So we are going to change those up. Okay. So, as far as its abilities, it gets a 5+ feel no pain against psychic attacks. Might not seem like that big of a deal, but if you're in a demon heavy meta or a psyker heavy meta, that's going to be really good. And then Unbound Fate is its psychic ability. In your command phase, select one Eldar Knights unit within 12 inches of the psyker. Until the end of the turn, that unit may use Engines of Fate 1 additional time. You cannot, however, use Engines of Fate twice on the same roll to give +2 to any result. So essentially, this is like a farce here, right? This gives you the ability to use your, detachment bonus or army ability 1 extra time on 1 unit. which I think is also fair, right? So it's just one additional time, right? So it's not every single phase. It just lasts until the end of the turn. So if you want something that has 2 attacks to get +2 to both of its rolls, for example, you could use this to give that a little bit of a buff. Okay, let's move on. Next, we have the Celestial Eradicator. Now, this is really expensive because this is going to be an indirect fire option for the army. And again, this is when indirect fire was insane. I think I would scale the points back significantly because indirect fire is not as good as it was 2 years ago. So if we look at this here, we have the same kind of stat breakdown except less movement. Again, this is going to be something that's more like a Dark Reaper type of thing. It's going to be in the backfield shooting, all game long. It doesn't have a great combat ability. So you can either take the Celestial Missile Ray, which is kind of a direct fire option. It has 2d6 attacks. Kind of forgot those up there. I'm going to put those up there, don't worry. So weapon skill, ballistic skill up here, attacks here. 2d6 attacks, strength 10, AP -2, damage d6. Essentially an Eldar missile launcher without the, plasma options. It's going to be anti-fly, 2+, and heavy. And then we have the Celestial Mortar Battery, 48 range, 3+ to hit, 3d6 shots, strength 8, AP -2, damage 2, blast, heavy, indirect fire. Again, because of the nerfs to indirect, I'm thinking of buffing these a little bit or reducing the cost. And then, of course, here we have a missile launcher array. So 2 missile launchers can either fire 2d6, strength 4, AP -1, damage 1, blast, twinling shots, or 2, strength 10, AP -2, d6, damage, twinling shots. And then in combat, it's kind of garbage for such an expensive model. 6 attacks, hitting on 3s, strength 8, AP -2, damage 2. Now, its ability is something I'm going to change. So I want to talk about this really quick. This is when people could just basically use as many insane braveries as they wanted to. It wasn't limited to once per game. So this is going to change. It's Wrath of Heaven. In your shooting phase, after the model is shot, select one enemy unit hit by 1 or more attacks. That enemy unit must take a battle shock test at -2. If the test is failed, the unit remains battle shocked until the start of your next command phase. This is incredibly strong, and I actually think it's a little too strong, seeing as battle shock is a little bit more viable now. So what I'm basically going to do is I'm going to change it, and it's going to be a completely new ability. I don't know what that's going to be yet, but I'm thinking it's going to be like a pinning kind of thing. Maybe until the start of your next command phase, your opponent is at -1 leadership and suffers maybe a debuff to their movement or something like that. Okay, let's go and move on. And again, in the comment section, let me know what you guys think about these models and if you'd make any changes, and I'll take those into consideration. The next model is the Divine Aspis. This is a tougher and tankier version of the Eldar Knight. So movement 10, slightly less movement, but toughness 11, 2+ save, wounds 22, leadership 6, OC 10. This is your tank. So if you have problems controlling objectives, this is your guy. We also have a 4+ invulnerable save on this guy, and it's going to be 475 points. Now, it is very tough, but what it has in toughness, it loses in damage. It doesn't really have a whole lot of damage. You have the Spear of Divinity, which is locked. You can't use any other weapon with this guy. Hits on 3, 6 attacks, strength 12, AP -3, damage 3, and has the set defense ability, which gives you +1 to hit when this model is charged. So the turn you're charged is basically you're hitting on 2s. So you get some pretty good attacks out in the defense, but it is not an offensive weapon. Generally speaking, damage 3 weapons are good, but they're not going to just blow up everything in the game, right? And then you have a pulse laser array, 48-inch range, hits on 3s, 6 attacks, strength 9, AP -2, damage d6, twin linked. This is pretty good, but it's its only ranged weapon. Other than that, it does have a pretty cool special rule. If you're in range of an objective marker you control, any attacks made against this model are at -1 to wound. Now, you might think that this is just really tanky and it's impossible to kill, but again, there's just so much lethality in this game now, and honestly, I think it's fine. I think for 475 points, it's really expensive. It's much more expensive than Canis Rex even. And I think for, generally speaking, you're only getting 1 more save and you're getting less wounds than a regular Imperial Knight. So I think having these abilities, having a 4+ invulnerable save, and having -1 to wound is fair. But let me know in the comment section what you guys think about that. But honestly, I think this is a pretty fair model for the points. It's just basically a tank. Okay, next we have the Fey Mystic. So this is kind of like more of a Warlock version, I guess, of the Knights. So it's also going to be a Psyker. It's going to have a little bit of a faster movement, obviously, because it's not, limited by more toughness. Toughness 10, wounds 20, 3-up save, all that good stuff. As far as its weapons, it has the Sword Spear of Vol, which is going to be 6 attacks at strength 12, AP -3, damage 4 with dev wounds. And it's going to have a Shuriken Cannon array, which is just simply a twin-linked Shuriken Cannon. But it's going to have 2 of them. So by the way, all the big knights, their arrays have 4 weapons on it. So 4 Shuriken Cannons mounted in the chest or mounted on the shoulders. And that's how much you're going to get. Pretty good number of range attacks here. But the main thing about this model is the Warp Siphon. 18-inch range, hits on a 3-up, D3 attacks, strength 5, AP -2, damage 2. It ignores cover. It has siphoned power ability, which is its main point, and it's psychic. Now, what siphoned power does is in your shooting phase, if this weapon successfully inflicts damage on one or more enemy models, then until the start of your next command phase, this model gains Feel No Pain 6-up and fights first. So, this is the fights first model for the Eldar Knights. Now, when I make more data sheets for this faction, I think I'll probably also give other things fights first. But this is a very powerful model for this ability. So basically all you need to do with those D3 attacks is hit and do some damage. It's not guaranteed, right? It's not guaranteed to do damage because it is a powerful ability to have fights first on the night. But you will gain Feel No Pain and fights first. As far as its ability goes, psychic attacks made against this model gain the hazardous keyword, and that's basically it. So its ability is lackluster, but what makes this model powerful is the fact that it has that Feel No Pain and fights first. Okay, let's move on. Let's move on to the Hip Arc. The Hip Arc is the Autarch equivalent, and basically you are armed with a Blade of Isha. You are getting 6 attacks at strength 10, AP -3, damage 3. Might not seem that good, but it does have the Purification ability. And Purification means that enemy units cannot use the Feel No Pain special rule against damage caused by this weapon. So really annoying, Imperial Knights with that 6-up Feel No Pain. If they're going against this thing, they're not going to get that against this guy. It also has a Bright Lance array, which has 2 attacks, strength 12, AP -3, damage D6 +2, and twin linked. I'm actually going to change this a little bit in the codex. I'm going to make it have more attacks. But yeah, that's about it. And I'm going to give some options to the different models as well. I think it's fair to say that every big knight can choose between all the different Eldari weapons just as an array. So you could either have the Bright Lance array, the Star Cannon array, all those good things. I'm going to go ahead and make those options for all the different knights. All right, so let's go to its abilities. So I'm going to change this abilities rule because this is what it basically read 2 years ago. But now I'm just going to kind of make the Hip Arc kind of like an Eldrad in that it gives +1 CP. So Strategic Insight, if this model is your Warlord and on the battlefield, once per round when a friendly Eldar Knight model is selected as the target of an Eldar Knight stratagem, that stratagem costs 0. That's way too strong. Especially now, like back in the day 2 years ago, this was very common, right? You had a lot of models that did this. Now nothing does this. It just reduces the stratagem cost by 1. So what I'm either going to do is I'm just going to give you a CP to use, or I'm going to just basically have it say that, right? Reduces the stratagem cost by 1 to a minimum of 0. All right, next up is the Labyrinthian Manipulator. And this one is, again, really cool model. I'm really proud of what I did on the special rules on this one. So this one's a little slower. It's not that durable, but it has a really cool special rule. So again, melee and ranged options, not great. Daedral Staff, 6 attacks, strength 8, AP -1, D3 damage, sustained hits D3, psychic. It can get a lot of hits in, so there is that. And same thing with its ranged weapon, as well, right? 6 attack, strength 7, AP -2, damage D3, sustained hits D3, and psychic. That is a pretty good package against heavy infantry. We are going to change that damage D3 into a straight 2 in the codex. But if we look at the ability Ghost Walk, this is a support model. So in your command phase, you can roll 1d6. On a 2-up, and I'll probably make this automatic in the future, select one Eldar Knights model within 12 of this Psyker, remove that unit from the battlefield, and set it up within 3 inches of this Psyker. If an Eldar Knights unit is set up within engagement range of any enemy units in this way, it counts as having made a charge move this turn and is eligible to fight this turn. So that's what's really cool about it. So, for example, if this model charges into something or an enemy unit charges into you and doesn't kill this model, then you can bring an Eldar Knight unit within 12 immediately into combat with you. So you don't have to, roll the charge roll, you don't have to move or anything like that. You just bring it right in and it counts as having made a charge move, which is kind of cool. Again, how powerful is this ability? I don't know if it's super powerful, but it's really cool. I am going to look at this thing again and see if it's really worth $525. I don't think it is. I think it's way too expensive for this, but we're going to kind of maybe give it some extra weapons and stuff like that to bring it in line. Okay. Now we have some of the small knights. So one of the first small knights is the Nimbus Pathfinder. This is your infiltrator model. It's armed with a Nimbus long rifle, which is essentially just a bigger version of an Eldar long rifle. It has 1 attack, strength 10, AP -2, damage 4, and precision. Now, I had a lot of people crying about this when I first revealed this on the channel, saying it was super OP, that it was, just broken beyond all belief. Guys, this is not, I'm sorry, this is just not broken. I'm actually thinking of increasing the damage to 6, and I think that would be totally fine. Most characters have a 4+ invul, and if you are afraid of a single attack going through against you and killing your model, then you can go ahead and just hide behind some terrain. That's all it takes to counter the precision. But it is there, so it's something you have to think about. And we have a twin scatter laser, which is just a twin link scatter laser, not that big of a deal. We are going to give it sustained hits like it has in the codex, and then the Nimbus Glaive, which is just 4 attacks, strength 8, AP -2, damage 2. Again, this is just a power fist, essentially. Not that big of a deal. 140 points, does have reduced stats, so it has toughness 8, move 14, 3-up save, 10 wounds, leadership 6, OC 8. The Imperial counterparts have more wounds. So this is going to be really fragile. Essentially, think of this thing like a more fragile Wraith Lord, but with a 5+ invulnerable save. Now, as far as its ability, it has Infiltrate, and enemy units that are set up on the battlefield via Infiltrate cannot be deployed within 12 inches of this model. So this is a way for you to stop people from infiltrating and move blocking your whole army on turn 1, which is a big issue for knights. It's one of the biggest things that knights have to deal with. Knights can move over enemy models, but they can't necessarily stop everything. And because Eldari are the faster, more nimble faction, I figure it's good to have an ability like this. I might change this to no deep strike within 12 because that's what, kind of some armies have had, and we don't really have a unit that does this. So I think this might be abused. Somebody actually brought this up, they brought this up 2 years ago, but they said this could be abused because you could infiltrate this in the center of the battlefield, and because of the large base size of this thing, opponents would not be able to actually infiltrate on certain key points, and that's probably an issue. So we're going to probably have to change that a little bit to just say no deep strike within 12. I think that would be probably more fair. But yeah, we are going to make changes to this guy, but in general, I like the idea of a knight sniper, a sniper knight. Next, we have the Outrider Vanguard. This is like the, battle line version of the Eldari Knights. And by the way, none of these have battle line, but we are going to have battle line models in certain detachments. So we're going to have a little knight detachment, and they are going to have battle line. Again, same stat line, but this guy is going to be a support model for your bigger knights and your other knight models. So it's armed with the polarity cannon, has D3 attacks at strength 12, AP -3, D6 damage with blast and the guided fire rule. We'll go into that in a second. It has a twin shuriken catapult. Again, just a couple little shots here and there, twin linked, and armored feet, which are absolutely awful in combat. This is going to be just a basically standard support model for your army. It's 130 points, a little bit cheaper. However, its ability is very good. So it has two different abilities: guided fire. In your shooting phase, after this model is shot, if it makes a hit against an enemy unit, then that unit is exposed. And an exposed unit loses stealth and the benefit of cover against range attacks. And that is going to be until the end of the phase, which I have to go ahead and put in the end here. Right? Oh, it already says it. Never mind. I did put it in there. It's exposed until the end of the shooting phase. Okay, so that's a really good ability. It also has Scout 9, which is, again, Scout is a very powerful ability, and then this model is eligible to shoot in a turn in which it fell back. So you can't really just lock it up into combat. If you try to lock it up, it's just going to move somewhere else. So pretty cool. Also, just as a little note, every single Eldar Knight model has that nimble ability, whether it's a big knight or a small knight. All right, now we have the next data sheet, which is the Sacred Phoenix. This is like the Flamer version of the Eldar Knights, the Flameo. So we have the Conflagration Cannon. Sorry, had to look at that twice. The Conflagration Cannon, 24-inch range. It has 3d6 attacks, strength 6, AP -2, damage 1, blast, ignores cover, and sustained hits. And then we have a Flamer Array, which is going to be 2d6 attacks, strength 4, AP 0, damage 1, Torrent, ignores cover, twin linked. So basically a twin linked Flamer. Well, two of them, two twin link flamers, and then we have the Conflagration Whip. So the whip is kind of like the Balrog's whip from, Lord of the Rings. We have 10 attacks with this thing, strength 6, AP -1, damage 1, sustained hits 2. This is going to be really your light infantry killer, so if you go up against a horde of stuff, this is going to be what you want to take. Its special rule is that it gets +1 to wound with its Conflagration Cannon against enemy units partially or wholly within a terrain feature. So if a unit is in a terrain feature at all, even if just one model is in there, then this model is going to get +1 to wound against that unit. So again, there's nothing better than this guy to clear out light infantry. 3d6 attacks with blast is going to clear out a lot of Gaunts, a lot of Imperial Guardsmen, a lot of, little Zangors or Poxwalkers or whatever you have to take out. Okay. Next, we have the last of the little knights, the Terra Oscillator. And I think this guy is like really cool, honestly. But we do have to change some of the rules on this guy. So it's 140 points. It has the Vibro Fists and Vibro Pulse. So this is based on Vibro technology. In combat, it has 6 attacks with strength 8, AP -2, damage 2, and twin linked. So pretty good weapon in combat against regular Space Marines. And this is kind of more of your bruiser type of, light model. We have the Vibro Pulse, which is a short-range torrent weapon. It's basically a D6 version of the Yinkarn's range attack. So D6 attacks instead of D6 +3. Strength 7, AP -1, damage 2. It does ignore cover. And lastly, we have the Oscillator Cannon, an 18-inch range weapon with D3 attacks. Strength 9, AP -2, damage 3, ignores cover. So a good number of range attacks and a good number of melee attacks. It's basically just a beat stick kind of character, but it also has some utility like all other Eldar stuff. And it's a little bit fragile, of course, at toughness 8 with only 10 wounds. So its ability is this: enemy units, excluding units with the fly keyword, cannot fall back while in engagement range of this model. And the kind of idea behind this is that as it moves, it has this ability to create this unstable ground around it, like kind of like a centralized earthquake or a localized earthquake in which models can't really move. So it prevents them from falling back. Now, this ability right here, when shooting at enemy models this unit is engaged with, this weapon gains +1 strength, -1 AP. I think that's honestly a little too good. Like, it already is pretty good on its own. I don't think we need to add that in there. I might actually change this to be something else. Or I might just change the weapons slightly to make them a little bit stronger, but not with -1 AP. What I might do is just add a strength here, and call it a day. But we'll see. It's a pretty strong character, I think, or not character, but it's a pretty strong Eldar Knight. Let me know in the comments if you guys think this is OP. I personally think for 140 points, it's right where it should be, but maybe I'm a little bit off. I did notice when I ran this in my games, in my test games, basically testing out this index, that it did kind of perform pretty well for its points. So that may be something we have to look at. The next one is the Void Annihilator, and this is like your Shining Spear equivalent. It is a big knight with movement 12. It has the Neutron Lance, which is going to be, hitting on 3s, 6 attacks, strength 16, AP -4, damage 5. Lance is the ability that it has. And then it also has a ranged version with 12 inches. It's going to hit on a 3. It has 1 attack at strength 14, AP -3, damage 4. No abilities, though. And lastly, it is armed with the Star Cannon Array, which is going to get 4 attacks, basically a twin-linked double Star Cannon. So pretty simple there. Now, its special rule is that if it hits with its Neutron Lance at range, that enemy unit is marked until the end of your turn, and then while it's marked, this unit can reroll charge rolls against it. I'm going to change this ability, guys, because when I ran this, it basically didn't even make sense, right? Like, being able to hit with this was sometimes not even possible, and then I wouldn't get to reroll charge rolls, and it was just like, this thing would sometimes do nothing. Like, when I ran this, it was super hard to get into combat, even with movement 12. It was just really difficult. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to simply remove this first part, and then I'm just going to say this unit can reroll charge rolls. That's it. I think that's fair. And if you look at the, kind of like lore behind this thing in the old Eldar Knights epic game, it was basically a horse. So it had, it had 4 legs and it had the lance, kind of like a horse like would. Like a centaur, kind of, right? So pretty cool model. I like the concept, but it needs to be tweaked a little bit because it was a little bit weak when I played it. And yeah, having to hit something with a range attack to get the reroll charges was a little bit wild. So I think I'll just change that slightly. And I think other than that, it's a really good model. And lastly, we have the Warp Assassin. So this is like a Warp Spider kind of version of the Eldar Knights. It has the Shadow Spinner, 18-inch range, 2d6 attack, strength 5, AP -1, damage 1, dev wounds, and torrent. We are going to change these. This is something I ran as kind of a test in the later kind of balance, I guess, quote unquote, balancing era of this index. And it sucked. It was not good. So I'm going to buff this thing a little bit. Strength 5, AP -1. Turns out really doesn't do a lot of damage, even with dev wounds. So we're going to change that slightly. This is basically like, 2 spinneret rifles from the current Eldar Codex. So yeah, we're getting rid of that and we're changing it a little bit. The Shuriken Catapult Array, again, this is a big knight. I don't know why I chose to have a Shuriken Catapult Array on this thing, but it also sucks. And then Shadow Blades was a huge disappointment. Basically, the idea was that this was an assassin, but if you look at the attacks and profile characteristic, it's not that great of an assassin either, right? It's good at assassinating, don't get me wrong, but Jane Czar is better at assassinating than this thing, and this thing is 435 points. So I think I'm going to rework this thing a little bit, give it a better range attack here, and possibly give it a better kind of array here. You'll be able to choose some options. And then the Shadow Blades, I am going to change so that they're a little bit better. Probably it's just going to be more powerful attacks versus more attacks, but we'll have to see. However, I do like its special rule. So once per battle, you can basically, pull it out of, pull it off the battlefield, put it into strat reserve, and you can come in the next turn or come in on any turn really in the future. So it's kind of like an uppy downy ability once per game. This is common, but I think I am going to change this a little bit to be a little bit more warp spidery. So maybe instead of warp shift, instead of an uppy downy ability, I'm just going to have it move faster, right? So this thing would just move faster and I would give it fly for the turn. Basically, that's it. So as if it's a warp spider. And there would be a downside to this, obviously. I think it would have to take some sort of battle shock test. And if it failed the battle shock test, then it would take damage. But I think that's what I'm going to do to this model. And also it's 400, again, it's really expensive. So, having a super expensive model like this basically have no damage is a little bit off. And that's what I found in my playtesting. But yeah, this is the index. I think honestly, you guys could, if you guys have friends that you want to go ahead and run this against, that's fine. If you're looking at the base sizes for all of the big knights, the ones with 20 plus wounds, is going to be the same base size as the large Imperial Knights or the Wraith Knight. And then the small knights, the, kind of, what are they called? War Dogs of the Chaos Knights is going to be the same base size as things like, where is it? This guy, the Nimbus Pathfinder, right? These smaller knights are going to have the same base size as the War Dogs or Warglaves of Imperial Knights and Chaos Knights, respectively. So yeah, that's the index. I'm going to go ahead and redirect you guys as soon as this, kind of Kickstarter gets going. I'll go ahead and link it to you guys so you guys can, support it if you want to. So some of the things you guys will be getting with the Kickstarter is you're going to be getting a digital download of the codex when I finish the rules for it, which will be probably by the end of July. You're going to be getting, if you, kind of support the program enough at a certain level, you will get to choose and make rules up for an Eldar Knight of your own within reason. So don't make something so OP that no one's going to have fun against it. And I also have, as the creator of this that wants a balanced experience for people, I'm going to have final say, but you're going to get to have the idea of the model itself to put in there. So if you want to make a knight that has, 2 swords or 4 swords, it's like a count, or what is it called? The General Grievous of Eldar Knights, go for it. We can create something like that and make it really cool and have balanced, fun rules for it. That's also really good and useful, right? So, and lastly, if we get enough support, now that's key. If we get enough support, I will also print out the codex for you guys. I'm hoping we can get some art and some, STL design ideas and stuff, put those in the codex as well. And we're going to go ahead and ship it out to people who support over a certain level. So once again, I would really like to be able to do that, but to be able to do that, we're going to have to reach our funding goal, because I'm not going to, I'm going to have to give some money to the people who create these things, because I can't create art for anything. I'm not an artist. So, the artists that make the stuff, that give me permission to put it in the codex, the FANDEX, and actually distribute it, will have to be compensated. So if we get supported enough, we'll be able to do that. But if not, then what I'm going to do for you guys instead is I'm going to get everything I got permission for. We're going to put it together in a kind of a booklet, and I will send it out to you and hopefully make it look really nice. But it's just not going to have as much content in it. So yeah, that's basically it. If you guys have questions, please email me at proxy.hammer1@gmail.com. You'll find my email in the description of this video, and you will be able to kind of reach out to me to ask me questions or, address any concerns you might have. And again, I really just want this to be something that helps build the community. I know a lot of you guys are more into casual and narrative stuff. So I really also want to make this casual and narrative friendly, right? This isn't just a super competitive, try hard army that's just going to beat your opponents into a pulp. It's going to be a flavorful army with fun rules and fun abilities that you can use in games against your buddies. So if you want to play against somebody that always plays Chaos Knights or Imperial Knights, and you're like, hey, I have this FANDEX made by, this guy called Proxy Hammer that I want to try out against you. Is that okay? Your opponent agrees to it, looks at the rules, and is like, okay, yeah, these seem balanced rules. Let's play a game. And then you play a game and you have some fun, and that's it, right? So I'm hoping that we can do that for this upcoming project. So yeah, anyway, email me with any questions. Let me know if you want to support the channel as well via Patreon. I am going to put up the Eldar Codex as a digital PDF to anybody who supports the channel via Patreon at the member level or above. So, be prepared for that as well. I'll go ahead and put that up for you guys when the project is finished. If you want to support in any other way, right, you want to donate, any other means besides the, Kickstarter, then I will also be able to kind of, provide you the digital rules as well. But yeah, that's it for today's video. thanks for watching, and more updates to come about the Eldar Knights. See you later, everybody. Have a good one.